So hello everyone. I'm Michael Naylor, and I'm the director of the Main Enneagram Center for Transformation and Well-Being. And I'm here today with my friend Jenner, a beloved Type 5, who's going to take us on a journey through the agony and ecstasy of being a Type 5 and her particular journey. So thank you so much for being here. Really appreciate your time and I usually ask the first question along this lines, like, how did you discover you were a Type 5?
Mhm. Hello, Michael. I appreciate you too so much. Five, let's see. Okay, I got sober 30 years ago, and I was a few months into it, and somebody in a very small group, 12-step group, gave me a copy of the Enneagram types by Rizzo and Hudson, personality types. And it wasn't even a second guess. It was very, very clear that I was a five. I never fought against it. I never looked into any other type. It was just clear as day for me.
Yeah, very good. Me and myself too, with the same book. Um, so say a little bit about, what you identify with in terms of Type 5 patterns and how you've gone through transformation and just some of the hurdles and some of the upbeat positive stuff.
Mhm, mhm. Um, and I just want to say thank you to you because we both have the overlap of 12-step recovery and the Enneagram, and those two kind of converge at a certain point. So, okay, the five stuff that I extra relate to is, well, two things: wanting to be prepared for life. So I confessed to you a minute before we started that I was researching my own story and your book and my everything just to be prepared. And then this phenomena of having a battery. And there are two things coming up in July 2025 that are huge events. We have the International AA coming up with maybe 64,000 people.
Wow.
We have the International Enneagram at the end of July with thousands of Enneagram people. And I'm feeling the effects. It's one thing to feel your battery discharged after an event, but
Mhm.
I'm worried and trying to charge my battery up before these events because they're going to take a toll on me as a type 5.
Yeah. Well, maybe talk about that, how you have that susceptibility to having your battery go low on you.
Yeah, it's not, it's when I can control it and when I'm by myself, I have high energy. And
Yeah.
when I'm talking one-on-one, that also doesn't tend to deplete me. Um, but when it seems like a group of people, it's too random. I don't know
Mhm.
where the request is going to come from, and that's the kind of social phobia, especially as a self-pres 5, that I suffer from.
Yeah. Okay. Okay. So, um, say a little bit about, how the Enneagram has helped your recovery.
Yes, yeah. And I never did get to the high points of 5, but I'll say that it made me aware of the stinginess, the mental fixation of um, thinking that I'm putting on a pleasant face, but people can feel that I'm shut down.
Mm.
Um, and it can be, I've experienced it by being around other fives when they're stressed. It can feel like a really cold shoulder. And I'm capable of doing that. And how the Enneagram in particular has helped is the two arrows, the type 8 as being strong and taking my place in this world of I am through the body center. I
Yeah.
really appreciate that. And I've got type 8 friends that mess with me. Like when we're walking in the crosswalk, I want to scuttle across. And my type friend, 8 friend, she just walks slowly and she's teaching, take up my space. And And then the type 7, which is, I think you interviewed my friend Art 2 weeks
Yes.
ago.
Yeah.
Yes. And talking with him, he's more optimistic than my type 5. And he believes in this abundance in the world. Boy, that's a crazy thought to me. Is I'm trying to expand into more limitless possibilities, which our literature and Alcoholics Anonymous teaches us, and also in the Enneagram.
Yeah. Well, say a little bit more about what are there other patterns of type 5 that have been challenging for you uh, that come to mind?
So, battery, being over prepared, taking my identity from my niche. I was going to go through your book and hit on some of the high points of that.
Sure. Okay.
Um, and you do capture some of the different assets of being a 5, which I really appreciate.
Awesome.
So, okay, so for anybody who doesn't know, the alchemy of Enneagram in transforming addiction. The reason why it's so helpful for those of us in recovery is that it has the wound or the relapse pattern for each type. And for my type 5, it's I'm on my own. And that is my old story. It's I have don't ask for help,
Mm.
don't offer help, just on my own. And that's
Mm.
the low side. And the high side is um, I think like omniscience is being open to how everybody can see an issue, how everybody is in the room, more open to the interconnectedness of us all. And I can tap into that.
Yes.
Uh-huh. And then one of your other main subheadings is the commandment. And the commandment for a type 5 is to be the expert. And back when I worked, I was an expert in science, and
Mm.
that was my niche. And I took great intellectual pride out of that.
Mm.
And that fulfilled my wish to be capable and competent, as you
Yeah.
brought out in the book. And then here was something I liked. You said, how do we want to see ourselves? And of course, for type 5, you captured the intelligent, but you also captured quirky. And I think of myself as quirky, and I like that you saw that.
Yeah. Awesome. Awesome. Well, you know, I've found that in working with type 5s that they're very sensitive to the energy around them. And I can see where, and I have a 4 with a 5 wing, so I can absorb the crowd pretty quickly and kind of feel like I've just been nuked and I've got to get away and withdraw and re-energize myself. But there's something about that really intense sensitivity that 5s embody that sometimes people don't realize is really operating, but really, really sensitive. And I think when they're at their best, they're extremely kind and want to support in whatever way they have with their capacities. And so I wonder for you, when you're at your best, what do you notice about yourself?
Mhm. And I'm a 5 wing 4, so we can reach across the dark night of the soul divide down there. And I think that you're completely right. I think sometimes we present as rather stoic and removed from emotion. And really, there's so much going on under the surface, and I'm sensing so much in the room that I can go numb on the outside, but really feeling it on the inside. And that would be at my lower levels. But on the higher levels, they call us observer. And to be there, to be in the world, but not of the world, to have a slightly zoomed out perspective has helped so many friends and sponsees in my life to be able to see problems with just a buffer zone between feelings and thoughts, and to help them see things in ways they may not have considered. And I have a deeply compassionate heart, but if I feel threatened, or I can be like a sea anemone, I can
Oh, that's a
close
great
down.
image. Yeah, that's a great image. Uh, yeah, thank you for that. Well, so um, I wonder if you'd say a little bit about your journey with using the Enneagram in your addiction recovery. Is that uh, and maybe say something about your book because as far as I know, your book and my book seem to be the only ones out there. I think there might be one other that was about the steps, but not written in the same way that we did it. So,
Right, right. There's Shalom, there's a few books, but they're not so one-on-one kind of a comparison the way my book does it. So that's good. Um, my journey, so I had to get physically sober before I was really ready for any kind of further psychological or spiritual growth. And that's what I appreciate about the Enneagram is both our 12-step program says that only the individual can do the work, but we can't do alone. We need the help of a higher power and each other.
mhm.
And then the Enneagram also is here are red flags for your personality type, but you're not going to be able to do the shock point kind of transformation if you're not touched by the third force, by some outside force. And that's been deeply my experience. And that's why I gravitate to the both programs. But so I had to get physically sober, and then around step 6 and 7 hour program where we start to look at our character defects, our shortcomings. That's when I got the copy of personality types, and I realized two things. It wasn't just the addiction to alcohol substances. It was my whole way of being was inadequate to actually do what I needed to do in life. Yeah, my great brain was wonderful at problem solving, but the stuff that I was craving in between was uh, connection and um, being anchored to a higher power, which I had no belief in before I got sober. And the 6 and 7 kind of inner work that needs to be done. I think the Enneagram addresses it the most specific of any of the different modalities that I've looked to. Was my mom was a psychologist, so we were raised in the home with all the different Myers-Briggs and Big Five and all the different modalities. And the Enneagram is the most spiritual and can take me the deepest than the rest of them that I've found.
Yeah. Okay. So, uh, and it sounds like you've had a good response in your neck of the woods to people being interested. Could you say a little bit about that?
Mhm. I so here was also I wanted to say a little bit about my Enneagram background. I'm here in the San Francisco Bay Area, so that
Yeah.
was the hotbed of it all back in the early 90s.
Hmm.
And so I was exposed to the narrative tradition, and I liked that because it was like people telling stories as we do in the rooms of recovery. Um, but for my experience, I would go to these weekend long retreats, so over in the peninsula, the south part of San Francisco.
Hmm.
And, and I can say that they affected me mostly from the head up. They were some kind of an intellectual awakening. And I would take a lot of notes, and maybe it would last for a week or something. But it wasn't until I found the Chestnut Pies Academy
Hmm.
where the both B. Chestnut and Aranio Pies offered something. We did a lot of Gurdjieffian movements or Sufi dance or body practices.
Hmm.
And we really went a lot deeper in the individual stories. So, that's the heartbreaking that I need. I needed to be affected by other people's Enneagram story, hitting bottom in our own personality type. I
Hmm.
needed the body and the heart to make it transformative. And I knew that that was there in the Enneagram, but it wasn't touching me until, like I say, I could get more into my body and my heart. Um,
Yeah. Well, I wonder, I was just thinking of one friend of mine is a type 5, and his father had just died from alcoholism. I said, he must be heartbroken, must feel just terribly sad. And he said, well, you might need to give me a book to read on sadness because I'm not really sure how to access it. And so I'm curious for you, like, It sounds like the G-fork and movements got you down in your heart and in your body. And any other practices that you do now that bring you into your body and in contact with your body?
Every day I take a walk and I kind of allow myself to be in my head on the way out. But on the way back, I play Roy G. Biv, where I look for something red in the environment, and then orange, and then yellow, etc.
Oh,
Maybe I'll go into my other senses to bring me to the here and now. I do
awesome.
breath work. I
Mhm.
do meditative practices that involve my body. I
Yeah.
think all of those are so important.
Yeah. Well, I know, with Russ and Don, both of them had a background in G-fork and essence work with the Diamond Heart. And, sort of one of the primary practices is learning to sense your body and bringing your attention into your body and inside, your arms, your legs, your fingers, etc. And that had a profound effect on me for bringing a kind of inner balance and less of the wavy emotional storm that I inherited. But I wonder for you, can you say more about your journey with your body and how you started to sense it?
You might have the wavy emotional storm, but I have the pinball machine gone crazy head center. And I definitely need my body is, and I can also be prone to being very idealistic. And
Mhm.
my body just brings me down to the here and now. Just
Yeah,
the awareness of the present moment is so right here, right now, everything's okay.
yeah,
And then what about 2 weeks? What about, a week when we go to that 4,000 person conference? Maybe that's going to be too much. But right here, right now, I'm fine.
yeah, yeah. Well, when I was inspired to write my book, part of a big piece of it was that I noticed people who had good recovery. It could have been 10 years, 20 years, 30 years, and then they hadn't done any outside work and they would hit a wall, and maybe grief would be coming up from the depths of them that they had no tool to navigate it. And they would up their meetings and take on more responsibilities, but it's like they hit a flat spot where what had been working for them stop working. And I've come to know that as a shock point where there's a new investigation I need to make on my own particular inner world, or a new teacher or a new teaching um, but I know when I hit those walls, to suddenly feel like I couldn't activate the same juice that I did for my recovery was rather terrifying. And I just saw a lot of really great men and women just suddenly vanish. And I thought, if they had, seems to me the 12 steps are really designed to get you prepared for entering those deeper states. And if there's a missing piece, it's a conversation about that. But I wrote it with the hopes that people would start thinking in that way. So I wonder for you, what's been your experience with people in recovery?
Most definitely, we hit plateaus. And it says if we fail to enlarge our spiritual life, we're not going to be able to handle the certain low spots that will come. And just like you said, we'll double down on our favorite tools and techniques. But I think so much of life is an internal journey where if we don't know the map, the territory, some people, I'm always interested in the internal journey.
Mhm.
Um, but some people just need to hear it in different words. So I'm never wanting to take people away from getting physically sober, however you define that.
Yes.
Um, but this grow or go is, I- I'm glad to be on a short leash. I'm glad to have the desire and the motivation to always be digging for the next layer
Mm.
because I don't idle well. I would not be happy just being complacent and good enough. Emotional sobriety is always can be deepened, and I find that beautiful.
Yeah. Well, I wonder if you'd say a little bit more about emotional sobriety and how you define it.
Mm. I would start with what it isn't. So
Mhm.
to be reactive is not emotionally sober. And I like the baby steps way out is to be less reactive means it's less intense. The flare-ups happen less frequently and they don't last as long. And it really means taking responsibility. And our steps, our fourth step inventory, our 10th step nightly inventory for me helps me take responsibility and also puncture the blind spots. You and I have talked before about the shadow and how interesting that is in both of our programs. Um, so emotional sobriety is being able to see things from multiple people's viewpoints, even if I have my own opinion, to be able to switch sides briefly and see it from somebody I've just had a conflict with, or not taking things personally. Um, and in my book, that's why I added some, not quite Enneagram, but addressing the mental plus emotional snags that we can have of misinterpreting our feelings for the true emotion, and to try to deconvolute the ways of not seeing things accurately, like catastrophizing or mind reading, or one of the ones that I do is shoulds. It's not just type ones that do shoulds. I do shoulds, and it's a way of wrong seeing that we can tease apart and do differently.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you. And uh, I would, I had a type 5 that I sponsored, and he said, one of the biggest expectations I feel as a type 5 is that I should know everything in advance. And he said, and so I just prepare as much as I can so I won't be caught off guard. But there's like this expectation, if I don't know something, that I should have known it in advance, even without studying it. It's like I'm just supposed to know stuff. And he said, that he's mellowed out around that, but it's just like a torment, this idea that if I'm not prepared and don't show myself to know everything when it comes up, that my inner critic says, you're bad or you're stupid or you're unlovable. How has that operated for you?
Well, completely. I mean, I confessed to you right before we met, I was rereading all these books and looking up quotations, and we're just having a conversation here. So allow
Hmm.
some spontaneity, some real connection to come in. And I once heard somebody say in a meeting, before she ever took calculus, she felt like she should know calculus. And
Yes.
that is just so crazy and so relatable for me.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, you mentioned the mental activity, the pinball activity, and I know Russ has talked about it as like an electric storm in his head center. But I wonder if you could say a little bit more about, what it's like for you when that mechanism is triggered.
Well, sometimes I have to confess it's really fun. I have paid attention and I have been able to layer five thoughts on each other. Now, some of them have to be pretty automatic and autonomic, but I can layer five thoughts on top of each other.
Wow.
And the idea of playing with the what ifs in your mind and being able to create universes and um, that actually is a great joy.
Mm-hmm.
But just like anything, like my first sponsor said, our assets, the very best of us becomes our defects when we take them too far.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Uh-huh. Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. And so that same, I mean, that can be, my mind is devouring me alive and it's not productive. It's
Mm-hmm.
not going to help me solve the problem. It's not going to help me live. It's just devouring me alive. And that's not the fun part.
Yeah. Well, I was thinking of one of my favorite friends in AA who's a 5, and he'll start his conversation with something like, I'd rather be home reading a book right now, but if I don't uh, if I don't show up for meetings, I'll be in my lab manufacturing new hallucinogens, so I've got to be here. And most vibes I've talked to tend to really have a passion for information, learning new stuff. What's been true for you?
You say that like it's a problem. Okay, okay, but then, with that arrow to seven, I have to be careful of seeking out too many outside references at a time because at a
Mhm.
point it comes time for me to integrate them, to check with what do I believe. And I was a scientist, so I was very good at taking, like, no one person is completely right, even me. So we believe in confidence intervals, like maybe this program is 95% accurate, or what this has said about me is 90% accurate. So I'm very good at assembling and taking the parts that are useful to me and interweaving them. I've seen that in you too, the idea of interweaving different disciplines. That's exciting for me.
Yeah,
Uh,
yeah.
yeah. Yeah.
So say a little bit more about your work as a scientist. Like what was your field of study?
Hmm. Um, I find it interesting that at first I was a micromolecular biologist, so I only cared about the DNA, RNA of bacteria and viruses.
Hmm.
And finally, I graduated to humans, where I started caring about disease as it affects uh, human DNA, RNA, the impact. And the very last time, it was ironic, not too funny, that I was doing cancer biology, the different genes that have penetrance or effect in causing the different cancers. And then I myself had cancer. So that was a rude awakening. But
Yeah, yeah. Okay. Well, so when you were a little girl, what was it like to be in the skin of a type five? I mean, what do you recall about your childhood and being and five-ishness?
there was a lot of four in it. I remember climbing up a tree and writing poems and making up little songs when I was very young
Okay.
and very idealistic and kind of dreamy. Um,
Hmm.
but by the time I reached school age, I had two temperaments. I was either a tomboy, very kind of upfront and competitive,
Oh,
or else I was the little nerd on the side of the yard reading my books that were, many grade levels above my level.
yeah. So how did your journey through grade school and then high school, which can be challenging for everyone? I mean, how did you navigate high school?
Alcohol.
Yeah, yeah,
Right? No
yeah.
social problems when you use the social lubricant, and then worked wonderfully while it worked until it just did.
Yeah, yeah. Well, so say a bit about what you really appreciate about being a type five.
All right. But I realized I was being a little too flippant. I would double back and say one of
Okay.
the things that I think was five about being in high school is that I never wanted to be subsumed by any of the cliques. So when I started to get in too good with the swimmers, I would switch to the burnout, switch to the jocks, switch to the nerds. And
Oh,
there's
good.
something, yes, iconoclastic about that position. So there's
Yeah.
that. Um, but then the good side of that is I'm very independent. I have let's say, fact-checking mind, but I
Oh,
also, as you touched on, have a deep, deep heart.
hmm.
But that's only going to be shown if I'm trusting somebody. Yeah, still, that's true.
Yeah.
Um, and I'll insert this here. My instinctual sequence is self-pres, then sexual, and so therefore having the one-on-one conversations is very energizing for me.
Hmm.
And I'm really trying to bring up social because I can tell that this is one of my life's journey needs is to be more comfortable in the flow of um, everybody out there. And yeah, yeah, I'm really seeing that as a growth. My chance for biggest growth is to go into believing that we're bigger than the sum of our parts, that I live in a benevolent world, not a malevolent world. Um, so that takes work. It takes
Yeah.
work.
Well, it's an interesting segue into just the other thing that I've noticed about fives is that they tend to be, at least the ones I've worked with, hyper aware of the danger in the world, and that there is a bit of a lack of intelligence running through uh, people who are in power, and a sense of I got to really be sharp to make sure I don't get swallowed by the ignorance of the world. Is that something that you relate to?
Yes, you hit my button. The idea that people are irrational and ignorant. Oh, that really frightens me.
Yeah.
And being prepared, I've got a lot of type six friends, and in the last 2 years, I've tried to lean more toward my six to integrate that. Is I do as much disaster preparedness as they do, but I do it, then I know when to stop, and they just keep doing this. But I mean, we can exchange, preparedness books on,
Mhm.
yes, when I fly, I do this and that, and I, I, I do see the negative coming.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Well, one of the other things I think I just noticed in talking with Russ, for instance, is this passion for the of the five to get to the bottom of things. I want to really know what is really real and true here, and yeah.
Okay, well, I think I can say this to you that you'll understand it. Yes, that's true. I can always go deeper in facts and information, but because I'm a person in recovery, I admit that there is also a spiritual realm where those tools don't function at all.
Mm,
And so I respect and like the structure that's made possible by facts and cognitive abilities.
mm,
But there's so much more that flows in between that is not quantifiable. Perhaps I can't prove. And the
mm,
older I get, the more important that realm is to me.
Thank
Do
you for
you do
that.
you relate to that part?
Oh yes, yes, definitely. Um, yes, I in the Gurdjieff work, there's certainly the focus. I've been involved in a Gurdjieff work for 18 to 20 years, and uh, there is a distinction between what we can see with our senses and what's invisible to the senses, which actually probably runs everything and we just don't sense it as often as we do the external sensory apparatus. So, um, yeah, so that's one where data don't really work very well, right?
There's a passage in our big book, Alcoholics Anonymous,
Hmm.
that it's in we agnostics. And, I came in as pretty much an atheist, so I knew I had that higher power to contend with in order to stay sober. And the part that really helped me, it was who amongst us has not witnessed a sunset? Who amongst us has not loved somebody or something? And are these things tangible? Or
Hmm.
are they the stuff that life is made of? And it was kind of a challenge to lean into the things that aren't quantifiable, love. And
Yeah,
um, I found that really beautiful and helpful.
yeah, beautiful. Yeah. Well, if I wonder if you'd say a little bit about your book. Do you have it there? Can you show
Yep.
it?
Oh, thank you.
Uh,
It's meant so it's called Enneagram for Recovery.
mhm,
And the funnel direction is meant to help people who have been sober for some time. Maybe they've done the steps already, but to go deeper using the Enneagram.
mhm,
But sometimes, like 2 years ago, I was able to present with Renee Siegel and Alex Senegal at the 2023 IEA conference.
mhm, mhm,
And we turned that lens around and we offered the 12-step principles for the wider population of just anybody interested in the Enneagram.
mm,
And for example, my chapter 1 is ego addiction. And Father Rohr says we're all addicted to our own way of thinking and feeling. And so we're all addicted, that is, using it despite adverse consequences to our old ego.
mhm,
And that becomes limiting. It becomes something that was helpful and useful for a while, but is just like the uh, relieve me of the uh, bo
Bondage itself.
bondage itself. Thank you. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Well, I think I'd heard you say that you took the principles of the 12 steps and infused those into work with the Enneagram. Is that how your book is structured?
Yeah, and even in one of the chapters, it has the 12 principles per step and
Hmm.
how often they have correspondence in the Enneagram. So,
Mm,
like
mm,
step one, the principle is honesty, and the type three's virtue is veracity, or getting real and telling themselves the truth as much as the rest of the world. And courage is the step four principle in our 12 steps, and courage is the virtue for type six.
yeah,
So there's, if there are two wisdom traditions, one expects them to have a good overlap. And
yeah,
I think that they're saying very similar things in different words.
yeah. Well, I think you're right. That's the extraordinary miracle
Yeah.
of the 12 steps in the big book. And so I was just thinking for myself that the passion of the four is envy. And so that's one I can, notice almost every day, whatever that, just that it's just the wind comes through and there's an envy cloud, and I have the choice of watching the movie from afar and just or soaking right into it and getting hooked on it.
Right.
And I've been sober like yourself many years, but I think I see the envy even more clearly than when I first came in. It would, maybe take me for 2 or 3 weeks and wouldn't even know I was swimming in it. And but now it's like a sharp knife. I just feel it, and it's like, oh my God, that is intense. So sometimes we talk about the five being avarice. Uh, how do you relate to avarice?
Uh, I prefer the word avarice to greed, because greed to me is going out and trying to grab, versus avarice is kind of hoarding up and keeping what I've got for me. And
Mhm.
so, yes, the time, the resources, the energy is avarice. And I would say that the 12 steps say this even better than the Enneagram, is all of our passions are ways that we lose sight that the universe, the flow, higher power, however you want to say it, that we have distance. We've created a gap. Like envy is the mistaken idea that if somebody else has something that I don't, they're somehow taking it away from me,
Mhm.
instead of believing in the abundance of the world. And
Yes.
avarice is the mistaken idea that if forget about daily bread, I need to know about tomorrow's bread. I need to
Mhm.
have control
Mhm.
and have a tight rein on who asks what of me. And
Mhm.
this is just losing sight that tomorrow I'll wake up and I'll have new energy. Tomorrow I'll wake up and
Yeah, I have that with that five wing. It will start to feel like I have a limited resource, and if I extend any more, it's going to drain me. And of course, if I've had a long training I've been doing, I'll go through that several times where I feel like I'm just dissipating all of my energy, and then I find that there's a boundless energy waiting for me if I can relax and be with it, and also take care of myself when I need to, which usually means recharging with some time alone. Yeah, one of the so that said, I wonder if you could say a little bit about how you've worked with the recovery community with this material.
So I came back from one of the Chestnut Pious retreats, and I asked them, who's doing this overlap of Enneagram and 12 steps, because this is all sounding very familiar. And they thought that there were a couple of people, but they weren't clear who.
Mhm.
And so I started offering it to my friends about, here's some Enneagram tools. Like, I'll mention the impetus for my book was I was sitting with a sponsee. We were working on her step 8. Step 8 is the step where we prepare ourselves to go and make amends. So we're entirely ready. No, made a list of all persons we had harmed and became willing to make amends to them all.
Mhm.
And it struck me how the Enneagram had just been talking about shadow, how um, we're so invested in seeing our own side and not seeing the other person's side. And that this was really the idea that was being asked of me to do the forgiveness in order to make the amends. So I
Mhm.
started to try to do a one-on-one correspondence between STEP and Enneagram tool. And
Mhm.
I was offering it kind of willy-nilly. And then I
Mhm.
said, well, I got to get organized. So I wrote the book. And out of that, now I facilitate workshops where I do them on Zoom so people can come from all over the country. Um,
Awesome.
and what's good about it, and what we have learned from being in the rooms of recovery, is to not just lecture at people. Because when I was being lectured at, it would just stay, like I say, from my head on up.
Yeah. Yeah.
But to introduce the idea, they get to read my chapter. And then I ask everybody, what was your experience this week with this idea?
Yeah.
And when people hear from other people reporting from different portions of the Enneagram,
Mm.
oh, a type 6 looks at it this way, and a type 8 looks at it this way.
Mm.
It they learn the Enneagram the way it was designed to be, not just tell me about me,
Yeah. Yeah.
yeah, yeah, yeah.
Well, I
It,
know the Surrender School is using that model, going through the 12 steps and using the types and how they relate to step 2 or step 3 or step 4 and doing a lot of uh, breakout groups that really allow people to really expand on their experience as type related to that particular step. So it uh, really capturing the best of both worlds, I think, which,
yes, and so Cheryl R. out of the Surrender School was the
yes.
one to lead that, and she was making a more direct comparison of the step, and I was making a more abstract comparison.
Oh, okay.
So I listened to her online videos, and it was like being um, fire hosed. There were so
Uh,
many ideas. I think she's the type 8, and it, and there's room for all of us. There's room
sure.
for all of us. But I'm trying to get to um, something internal. I think
Hmm.
something that is.
Hmm.
Do you see how? And you talk about the little guy, how we were formed when we were very young.
Yeah.
Something really basic in us that was good and right, but doesn't need to be there now, and to kind of grow past that. And that's the
Yeah.
way I've offered my book.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I like I was thinking, the whole idea of peeling the onion to get to essence or that pure place of consciousness that we were born with. And I think the Enneagram does a lovely job with that, and particularly in the model, there's different models. The levels of development can be useful in that to get up the higher levels, you've got to really be peeling the onion of your undigested suffering. And so a lot of times, fives of Taco would say, I have a really hard time getting to my feelings and actually feeling my feelings. I think Russ uses the word the dry heart when they're disconnected and they're in a sense sort of cut off from the neck down. But for you, what has your journey been around just being able to feel and sense your emotional body?
Mhm. As we hinted at before, it's not that I'm cut off from my feelings when alone or after the fact.
Okay.
But when I'm overwhelmed, I go numb. So, for example, my dad died of smoking and alcoholism when I was 17.
Mm,
And I didn't process that for the way that you said that your person was wanting to read a book about it. I didn't process that grief for 2 years. And then I saw a movie, which was kind of triangulation. Sometimes I get to my feelings from an outside art form or book or other person, and
Mm-hmm.
I broke down crying. And
Mm.
I was drinking then, so I wasn't very adept at processing my feelings as they were happening. But then contrast that with my mom, who died 2015. She died of drinking and smoking. So same thing, opposite order. And I was very much present. I knew she was dying. I knew she was dying of alcoholism. I went to Al-Anon, desperate as I was when I came into the other program. And um, there was nothing to do other than to feel it.
Yeah,
If I'm not going to drink again, then I have to deal with life on life's terms.
yeah.
Um, and to fully confess, did still go to work, and I still took pride in working, even though I was crying when nobody was around.
Mm-hmm.
Um, it was I, a gift and a curse of five is having a gap between my feelings and my thoughts. And
Mm-hmm.
so I was still performing, but I was crying. I was
Yeah,
brokenhearted.
yeah. Okay. Yeah. So today, we what's sort of the growth edge for you today? Where are you rubbing up against shadow stuff? Is there anything that's real clear to you around that?
Um, Not shadow, but seven is a growth area for me. That's why I like my type seven friends because I heard when you interviewed Art, you said that both of us are intellectuals, both fives and sevens, but
Mhm.
they're more fun. And I wanted to take exception at that. We're great fun if you speak British humor. So so seven is a growth edge, and then as I intimated before, the whole social instinct, that is the hardest. That's the very hardest growth edge for me that I like my offering the workshop and chatting up people when we go to these big conferences. It's not that I want to do it. I just have to. It's kind of like the grow or go in the program is I have got this one precious life and I don't want to squander it by being my small self. I want to be my
Mm,
biggest deep self
mm.
and help a few people deeply along the way. That's my life mission at this point.
Yeah, beautiful. Well, I wonder if you wouldn't mind describing how that, in the Enneagram Institute's language, the blind spot, or the repressed instinct, like for those low socials out there who are listening, like how would they how would they notice it? How did you notice it? What are the features that grab you?
It says that we can be cynical against political or community action completely, completely. I, I just throw up my hands before I ever start. And friends who do it, I could be judgmental of them until I realize this is the healing balm that I need to grow is to believe more. And luckily I was brought to my knees and I had to trust in the 12-step group, which is a loving bunch of people who's very non-judgmental for the most part. Um, and that introduced me to the world of a bigger society that I could trust and believe in.
Yeah, well, I've thought about people entering AA, and I've noticed that sometimes the low socials have some of the most difficulty because it's such a social networked chat up, talk, tell your story that for a low social it'd be like, oh my God, what have I just entered? And depending on the degree of repression or suppression, I like that word better, of that social instinct, just doing some of the simple things like getting a sponsor can be really huge. So how did you navigate that?
Well, I think we can use what we have to go toward what we need.
Mhm,
And there's nothing like desperation, gift of desperation.
mhm,
And in my head, I could study the steps in the book And then my sexual is my secondary instinct. And so I enjoy the play of mind and spirit with talking with one person. And so
Okay.
getting a sponsor and trusting her and telling her my fifth step where we talk about our inventory of how we overdo sex, security, or social needs.
Hmm.
Um, that wasn't hard in
Mm.
as far and just trusting the process. I had already dabbled in the program before and I didn't
Yeah.
make it because I wasn't desperate enough for both the human interconnectedness that I
Mm.
could avail myself of and higher power. So by the time I came in, I knew I needed both of those. Um, and I was indoctrinated. They forced me to help somebody move when I didn't see how that was going to help my program, and going to coffee afterwards and socializing with people, and it, it just all had to be in order for me to stick the program, and thank God I did.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, one of my daughters is a low social, and she will say, sometimes I could just stay home alone and do my study and be just fine, but I know I need human beings. And then my next challenge is I'm not really sure if I'm likable or whether I even like them. And so that kind of question comes up like, do I, am I liked? I'm not really quite sure. And do I even like any of them? What do I do?
Mhm.
Yeah. So,
I can be a misanthrope, but I think part of that was a cover up that I did feel, the egomaniac with the inferiority complex,
yes.
that I was kind of iffy on my place in the world, but I just went around saying, I don't like people and I don't need people. And I was an actual hermit. So that's a type 5 at a pretty low level back when I was drinking.
Yeah. Yeah. Thank you for that. Well, anything you might want to, I don't know, add in terms of suggestions for type fives and recovery and just now, becoming, I call myself a recovering type four, and along with being a recovering alcoholic. So I just wonder if you have some, gems that you think would be useful for the five to be aware of.
Mhm. I like the suggestion that we should throw our ego a cookie ever so often, and
Mhm.
that allows me to be more risk-taking and do the opposite, to do deconstructing actions, be amongst people, share before you're prepared, stay a little longer at the event, uh,
Mm.
talk about emotions with people. Oh my
Mm.
gosh. Well, this is somewhat scary. And then when you go home, to not beat yourself up about it, because when we try on new behavior, it's going to feel uncomfortable. And so okay, you actually might have done just a little too much there, but you made it through. And next time, the idea of resilience means I'm that much bigger for next time.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay.
And something I'd add for people who are stuck with us type fives at home is eventually we're going to ask for our alone time. And please don't take it personally, because the boomerang effect of somebody having hurt feelings, because honestly, I just need to go be by myself and read and decompress. It is not meant personally at all. And I'll come out even sooner if I'm not nagged into participating before I'm ready.
Oh, okay. Well, if you were to have a how-to book around how to be in relationship with a five, what might be some of the principles that you would?
All right. Well, consider I'm self-pres. So don't there's a wonderful type 8 friend, but his volume starts loud and goes louder. My nervous system, we gotta kind of keep things at a medium level, okay? And the other thing is, okay, here's a term I've coined is, how we talk about emotional insensitivity? I think that there's such thing as intellectual insensitivity, which is talking down to a person, repeating oneself, saying very, very mundane things that don't need to be said, um,
Mhm.
not remembering the points in a conversation. I mean, I love to be able to leapfrog with somebody. That's why I like talking with you so much.
Yeah.
Um, so please let's not talk about the weather too long. It's interesting. Um, and just I do have a playful nature. Yeah, and it will most definitely come out if I feel that there's space for it. If
Yeah.
I feel inundated and there's a tidal wave of something, body energy or feeling
Mhm.
energy,
Mhm.
where there's no space for me, then we just don't need to play.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. And any other principles of how to be with the five and be successful at connecting with them? I like the intellectual and
Mhm.
that's a good one.
Yeah, I can't think of more now. No.
Okay. Um, yeah, I had another question floating around there. Let's see what that was. So sometimes fives will say, as fours do this too, that they're not a body type, right? So as a type four, I was an athlete growing up, so I was in my body all the time. Didn't mean I was inhabiting it with this, but I really used it, and it's what saved me many times as a kid was playing sports because I was so shy around people. But what's been your relationship with sort of robust exercise and being in the body?
Mhm. Thank you for that because 459 is supposed to be low in the body center. And honestly, my body center has been my friend, my ally. I was a dancer in school and I kept it
Oh,
up in college and it was very important for me to be able to be kinesthetically doing something instead of thinking about it ahead of time.
mhm.
It gave, and still I walk every day. So that relief of just being in the body is, I need it. I need it. And at certain periods, I can use my body as a pedestal. You know, the great joke is, this is not my body. It is my brain's pedestal or something like this. I have been guilty of that too, but mostly I'm closer friends and allies with my body than I have been with my emotions. My emotions are just now becoming more in the moment with
Mhm.
people, more divulging.
Yeah, yeah. Well, another sort of interesting thing I've noticed, and Russ talks about this too, is this that they're that people sort of intruding on his boundaries without permission is like, he said he'd just get shocked by it, and it's almost like there's a electric force field, and if you put your finger into it, it's like away. So, what's been your experience?
I think I confessed this to you at one of our other meetings, but recently, last 2 weeks, I was out walking and I took my rest at the halfway point. I was sitting down on the nice, calm bench looking at San Francisco, playing with my phone, and there's no people as far as you can see. There's 100 yards in both directions, no people. And this woman comes by. I see this dark shape looming over me here in my kind of prickly, the nape of the neck sense. And she's doing her little stretches on my bench. And I look at her and I'm sending her all the daggers that I can to go away. And she just kind of smiles at me. And then when the passive aggressive didn't work, then I stalked off and I said, I can't imagine that you would intrude on my space this way. And then she shot off, what? You needed the whole bench? And but here was the beautiful moment that I talked to you about before, is even a few steps away, I knew she wasn't meaning it as a self-pres or a five. Um, it- Territorial kind of expansion thing. She
Mhm.
was perhaps social or, made of a different Enneagram type. And she didn't mean it
Yeah.
malicious, but to me, it was complete fight or flight with her standing over me.
Mhm.
when I wasn't prepared. And and the good news is that I just kind of laughed at myself when I was walking away. Like, there you go again. You were being overly protective of your physical space,
Yeah.
not seeing that people are wired differently as far as their dominant instinct. And I didn't hold, I don't know if she held the resentment, but I didn't hold the resentment this time.
I'm wondering, can you hear my dog barking in the background? Oh,
No.
good. Okay. She's telling me that she needs to go outside, but she can wait a minute. So say a little bit about your dominant instinct, and how, how it's played out through the course of your life. Like, how would we know that this is your dominant?
Mhm. Something we didn't get to, and we may not, is that each part of being human, our body, our hearts, and our heads, has good things because they were given to us. They're native. But when we're in ego and fear, they go astray and they cause us harm and other people harm. And so the instincts, like our book says, they were given to us for a reason, but they far exceed their intended purpose. Is the self-pres instinct is beautiful because it's contained. I take responsibility for myself. I I don't ask people to do me favors if I'm able to do it myself. I don't wear too much perfume. I don't talk too loudly. I think this containedness of
Yeah,
self-pres is
yeah,
a blessing to other people who are also made sensitively. And then you take those same things too far, and I get prickly when somebody's in my space.
yeah. Okay, yeah. Well, is there anything else you'd like to add before we close, or anything that popping around, in your books, areas you really liked, or even, are there particular types that you have found most challenging for your chemistry?
There is one, but I'm not going to be rude and say it. But what I do when that's the case is I start to make friends with them,
No.
and then I see their good point, and we all have an overlap. You know, when you start to study triad work, you're brought into companionship with each of the other 8 types there.
Mhm.
And um, and I'm wondering why I don't, the thing about shadow is it's a rule of something I don't allow myself. And so maybe I can take the good part of that and grant it
Mhm.
to myself and still be okay with that.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. And as far as more, we could go on and on because we could talk about the passions. There's so many things we could talk about, but I just
Yeah.
appreciate the way we converse back and forth.
Awesome. Yes, it's good to be with you. And I'm so if you were going to choose one more thing to talk about, what might that be?
That maybe the passions have a good side. I know that we call them the virtues, but since it's on a continuum, is I was doing step 6 with a sponsee yesterday, and how pride, when it's not inflated, is a healthy respect for self, and anger, when not reactive, is a firm boundary of no, this is me. And each
Yeah.
of the 7 deadly sins, which is what the Enneagram would call the passions, has a due and proper place in us.
Well, we've covered a lot of really interesting points. I was thinking that one thing I've noticed in recovery, is that if we're talking about the defenses of people's defects, I call them defenses because they seem like they've always been, whatever the defensive pattern is, it ends up protecting either a loss or a sense I'm going to be harmed, and a lack of trust in the universe or in people. Um, but I, I find that using the word defenses has less of a charge in terms of negativity. But what's been your experience with that in terms of terminology and around the word defects? What are you at peace with?
I think you capture it perfectly when you talk about the little guy, the little person, how we were struggling to make it. And of course, we adopted certain defense mechanisms or techniques of getting by. But I will say that because my primary program is, you know what, a 12-step that involves alcohol,
Yeah.
then a course correction for one person may not be a course correction for another. Like
Hmm.
Al-Anon tends to need gentler language from the very beginning because
Yes.
they've been so hard on themselves. And
Yeah.
those of us who are running roughshod against people, is the first time through the steps, I needed to hear defects. Just call it for what it is.
Yeah. Yeah.
And then later on, it's time on, do you see how I got here? Not by mistake. I was little guy using my defenses, and then the gentler language seems better to peel the onion.
Yeah. Yeah. Thank you for that. Okay.
Oh, and have
Well,
you heard the part two quip on the onion when we talk in the room?
no.
It, if you're going to peel the onion, there's going to be a lot of tears.
Very true. Very true. Yeah, I've found in my own recovery, I've had to do a lot of inner work, emotional work, grieving, catharting, feeling. It's just been my journey, and also I know we talked a little bit about this. I'm sort of circling back, but uh, you walk every day. I try to work out every day in some form or another, whether it's swimming or biking or lifting weights. Because this little head center can get off into the imagination world, and I need to be back in my body. So um, that's been really important for me also. Uh, anyway, thank you so much for spending this time, and really appreciate all that you've offered, and uh, just appreciate the fact that you're doing work with the Enneagram and recovering folks. I have a hope and wish that it grows and people are able to access it and really use it for their own sense of well-being and growth. And because it's been so fundamental for me for expanding um, and learning, to have eyes on my personality patterns and learning how to more objectively observe them. And, one of the principles that Gurdjieff talk about is that if you learn to observe yourself, that starts to break the hypnotic power of the pattern. Kind observation is potent, and that particular principle was so huge for me in my own journey. And so I hope at some point that there's more infusion and conversation, and because I just think it was such a doorway for joy and growth for me. So anyway, I appreciate the work you're doing, and um, yeah. So anything before we go, or you?
What you just said brought up the Al-Anon program for development, which is awareness, acceptance, action, which is very similar to the 5 A's that David Daniels had in the Enneagram. Um, but without the acceptance, I'm not going to be able to call myself on the deeper and deeper layers. And I need to do that in order to take off the armor. I'm not going to be able to see something if I'm going to just whip myself into feeling guilty about it. And the process is seeing more deeply and doing more deeply then.
Yeah. Well, I like the expression, if you're going to beat yourself up, use a feather.
Okay.
Yeah. So, well, I think we'll close here. Thank you so much. Really appreciate it. And we